Did you know that we all play games in the healing and transformative world? And the ones that say that they don't might actually be playing the most dangerous games that exist in the spiritual realm, with themselves and with others. You might have already seen how healing often can turn into a performance. How people suddenly become gurus on social media wearing outfits that they never wear in their actual lives. Or how you can get triggered by someone in the ceremony space without knowing why. These are the integration games that we play. And today I will share with you 10 predictable games that show up in and after ceremony. And I'm sure many of them are games that you are playing right now in your own life. And awareness creates a conscious choice, and I hope that these games can be helpful on your journey.
The Ayahuasca Integration Podcast.
In the early days of psychedelic research, especially in the 1960s, when LSD was being studied and used in a therapeutic and exploratory setting, researchers started noticing something interesting about the behavior that was shared during the influence of psychedelics. It was not just what people experienced, but how they behaved while they were in these altered states. And one of the earliest attempts to name this, if we don't include all of the wisdom from shamanism for thousands of years, was a short manual published in 1967 called Sessions, Games, People Play, a manual for the use of LSD written by Lisa Bieberman. It was written to help people recognize the predictable patterns that tend to show up during sessions when intensity would rise and our ordinary reference points would fall away. What they observed was simple and striking. The content of psychedelic experiences varies enormously. The visions that we have, the memories and insights, and the emotions are really individual, but the patterns that we show and behaviors are not. People tend to respond in very familiar ways. They avoid, they perform, they take control, they withdraw, they distract themselves, they project, and the same moves appeared again and again across different people and sessions. And I've also seen this over and over again. After 10 years of working with ceremonies, integration, and facilitation, I can see that the medicine can change, the setting can change, the language might change, but the games that we play are remarkably similar. And over time, I started introducing this idea to clients after we worked together for a while, and once there was established a lot of trust. And the purpose wasn't to correct anyone or to point something out from a space of wrong or right. It was to give someone a way to recognize themselves without collapsing into shame or blame. When someone says, this is one of my games, something opens up and there's a tiny bit of space, a little bit more choice, and also less attachment and identification. They don't have to stop the pattern. They just don't have to be completely inside it. They can also look at it from the outside. And it's also important to say this clearly before we dive in. There is no point where the games disappear. You can study enlightenment teachings. You can meditate for decades. You can go to the jungle. You can sit on a rock on a mountaintop by yourself. But parts of you will still be playing games, even with yourself, even with silence, even with nature. There is no way out of the game that I found, and there never was. That's just another game we play when we become spiritual, to be non-dual, to be no mind, to be non-human. What is possible is to become more conscious about the games that are being played right now. And that is what this episode is for. I'm going to walk you through the 10 most common games that I see in psychedelic integration for ayahuasca. And for each one, I will share some stories and practical integration tools that I use for myself and for others as we enter the sacred ceremony space of ayahuasca and also for integration. The first game is the avoidant games. And it's important that I name something clearly when it comes to avoidance games. We are all prone to avoidance, all of us. Mostly because avoiding our emotion is one of the fastest ways to feel safe. At integration work, avoidance is usually not just about emotion, it's about responsibility. Integration is literally the act of taking responsibility, not only for what you saw in ceremony, not only for your visions or your healing experiences, but for your entire life. And that is why very few people actually stay with integration work. It's the last thing most of us want to do. It's much easier to drink the cup, to cry, to purge, to have a revelation, and then to go back to the same behaviors, the same thoughts, and the same relationships. It's much harder to let those visions and truths actually shape your day to day life, to let them change how you speak, how you act, how you relate, how you choose. Integration asks you to be responsible for your emotions, for your thoughts, for your action. And that is confronting. So avoidance becomes a kind of safe freedom, a way to feel protected while staying unchanged. We avoid our feelings, we avoid slowing down, we avoid noticing our patterns, and most of all, we avoid a responsibility that's being called forward after ceremony. That's why the avoidance game is so common and why it shows up in so many different forms. And avoidance lets us feel free without having to grow into what we've seen. And we can also physically and emotionally be avoidant. And I'm sure you experienced this yourself if you've ever been in an ayahuasca ceremony or in a deep integration space. It's the moment when something in us wants out of this. We want to leave, we want to call it a day, we feel numb. We say the ceremony doesn't count, or we overload ourselves in the mind. The avoidance game can look really different, but underneath it usually comes from fear, anxiety, and discomfort. Maybe we're not used to shamanic traditions for once. Maybe we're not used to being in a vulnerable healing space with a lot of other people. Maybe we never spoken our truth in an integration circle before. So instead of staying present, we start withdrawing physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And the motivation behind this game is almost always a deep need for safety and control. We're facing intense emotions. We might be brushing up against suppressed memories or parts of ourselves we don't want to meet. We're entering an internal landscape that feels unfamiliar and overwhelming. And the nervous system reads this as a red flag and danger. And the mind wants to leave as fast as possible out of this situation to feel safe again. And I've seen this so many times in ceremony, and this is why I prepare them before ever going to an ayahuasca ceremony for the things that they are going to say to themselves if they're in the avoidance game. Because they're going to say, I don't belong here. I don't like the flute or the music. The temperature is too cold or too high. There's too much smoke. There's too many people. Or there are not enough people. Or there's too much noise. Or that person is crying too loud. Or that person is being too quiet. Or I need to get back to my bed. I need to get out of the circle. I don't feel like I belong here. I need to get back to my Netflix and my bed. And this avoidance and escape game also shows up as wanting to end things early. Someone saying, let's call it a day. I just want to go home right now. I don't need to finish the ceremony. I don't want to be in this integration circle. I need to rest. There is restlessness, checking the time, hiding in a journal, reaching for the phone. I had a friend once who would say, I don't feel anything. This ayahuasca doesn't work for me. And others would say, well, this ceremony doesn't really count. I know what works for me and it's not this. And what's really happening is a refusal to surrender, to let go of control to the container of the ceremony or to the integration space. And as facilitators, this can be challenging to witness because we can see that something real is happening, even if the person can't see it yet for themselves. And an integration tip I offer when someone is caught in this escape and avoidance game is simple. Come back to your breath, back to your body, and ask yourself, what part of me feels unsafe right now? What part of me is trying to run away? What does that part need in order to feel safe enough to stay? Because in ceremony, there will always be some triggers. For me, it has been a flute or the drum being too loud or people screaming or crying, and that's normal. But very often, when we're escaping from, isn't the sound or the space, it's the feeling or the process that is starting to unfold of us having to let go of control. Sometimes the invitation is to turn inward, to close out the outside world, and to go deeper within yourself. And in the integration circles, the invitation can be to stay connected to the group, to not close yourself off, to let yourself be seen. One of the biggest things that ayahuasca have taught me was this. Many of us believe that we're completely alone in our own suffering, that whatever happened in our childhood, or when we broke our heart for the first time, or the second time, or the third, this is something that we carry completely alone. We are the only one in the world that carry this heavy burden. that these parts of us are isolated, unsafe, unlovable, and unworthy of connection, of being seen and held. And when we want to run away from the group, we are actually running away from ourselves. And that is why it's so important to slow this part down, to meet it and to get to know it. And in every retreat, in every integration circle, there is always someone who is in the escape and avoidance game. Sometimes all of us. And if you're a facilitator, it's essential that you notice that energy, not to force it, but to gently bring it back into the group so that the person feels safe and included. Group dynamics can support that, but it usually starts with something simpler, helping that person reconnect with themselves, because the only way to truly connect with the group, wherever you're a facilitator or a participant, is to connect with yourself first. The second game is the attention and validation games. And this one shows up a lot with people who are new to ayahuasca or new to this deep healing space. The veil lifts, a whole universe opens up, and suddenly there's a strong impulse to tell everyone what reality is, what the universe is, and what everyone else should think about everything else. It can sound a little bit like explaining how powerful ayahuasca is, or what ayahuasca is, or who ayahuasca is, or explaining consciousness, or explaining the truth. The irony of this is that I once asked the shaman, have you ever tried other plant medicines? Because I had tried Kambo and Bufo and Iboga, and he said, I have only known ayahuasca for 50 years, and I feel I barely even know her. So why would I meet another teacher? And that humility just broke me open. Imagine 50 years with ayahuasca, your entire life, every single week, working with ayahuasca, and you still say you barely know her. But many of us who then drink ayahuasca for the first time, we feel like we need to tell everyone what ayahuasca is and who she is and how she works and what it is. And this can almost come off as mansplaining, not just for men, but that energy of explaining life or the universe to the room, what people should believe, how it all works now. And another version of this is also oversharing. We're wanting attention from the whole group. We're pulling the focus toward everything that is happening inside of you. Sometimes the circle turns into a therapy session around one person. They want feedback, opinions, validation, reassurances. And instead of going deeper within it, they want everyone else to be involved in the process. And then there's the version where someone has all the answers. They are commenting on everyone else's share. They're explaining what's right and what's wrong and where it comes from. And it starts to move a little bit into the guru mode. And I see this a lot with especially younger men. Not to generalize, but I see it a lot with younger men interrupting people in an integration space, saying things like, the reason why you think this is because you need to forgive yourself. And this doesn't really help, and it doesn't create safety in the integration circle or in a ceremony room. If someone is going through a deep process and then someone else is going to give them the reason why they're going through a deep process. I remember once going through a very deep process, and an unexperienced facilitator in that ceremony room said something like, we all go through darkness, just connect to your light. And I was like, just be quiet. Let me be in my process and don't start projecting your ideas onto me. And even in ceremony where people aren't supposed to speak, this game can be already activated. Someone feels the medicine is so strong that they have to tell the person next to them what's happening. And instead of staying in their own process, they start talking about the process. They're not digesting it. They're not even moving through it. They're starting to create a story around it. They're starting to practice what they will share the next day in an integration circle. And this is a big no-no in the ayahuasca traditions. Shamans will often say, don't share anything the next day. This experience was given to you. It's sacred. Take the time to digest it before you speak about it. And I have to say, honestly, I made this mistake many times myself, especially in my first years with ayahuasca. I was very loud with my experiences and I wanted to tell everyone about it. And also from a facilitator perspective, there is important medicine in all of this energy as well, especially in this game. For me, oversharing in the first 20 ceremonies and integration circle was necessary. I was like the one that was with my hand up the first and wanted to share first and couldn't wait. And I was learning to use my voice. I needed validation because parts of my childhood had never been validated, and there were no adults who would mirror my emotions and experiences back to me. So For me, this was an important part of my healing. So we should never shut people down from oversharing, but we should help them navigate and go deeper. What matters is helping them connect more and deeply to what's actually moving inside. And that's what made the integration circles I was a part of so powerful. That's why I do this work now. There was a skilled facilitator there helping me slow down and go deeper. And some of my most intense healing moments happened right here in the integration circle. Crying, screaming, releasing things, and putting words on emotions that had never had space before. That's why I'm so devoted to this integration work. When facilitation is done with experience and compassion, the healing impact of a group is unbelievable and it's so potent. And this is also why I see ayahuasca as a group medicine. The different facets, the different archetypal energies in the group moves the field. When we come together consciously, there is an enormous medicine available. We are all different organs of the same healing body. And when we come together, consciousness can move in a powerful way as a field. And it impacts everyone when it's done with safety and love. And when we are in the attention and validation game, someone also might start performing their insights in the room, their visions, their revelations, and it can become theatrical and loud and dramatic, as if their experience was deeper or more important than anyone else's. And what's interesting is that you can have an incredible deep experience and feel like no one else has ever gone through this before, like you're the first person to take a step on the moon. And then you sit in ceremony hundreds of times and realize people go very deep in very quiet ways. Someone can sit completely still and go through their own inner hell and say almost nothing about it the next day. They're calm, grounded, and integrated. So there's a misconception that depth needs to be visible. Often underneath the pattern is shame and a need for external validation, feeling inadequate, invisible, powerless, seeking recognition through performance. And that behavior becomes a defense. Instead of staying with vulnerability, confidence and expertise are projected outward, hoping for acknowledgement for the group. And this can mask insecurity and fear of being overlooked and judged as not enough. The oversharer is another expression of this. They want to tell every single detail, every single vision, every memory that popped up during ceremony. It's like the entire movie has to be retold. And for people who've done many ceremonies, this can feel exhausting. But for the person sharing, it might feel necessary. They need to document it and validate it and make it real. And that's why I often start integration circle by asking a simple question. What are you feeling right now? I don't need the entire experience. I know it was profound, one of the most powerful moments of your life, but we don't need every image and every thought of it. It actually can fragment your mind and pull us away from what's actually alive right now. One person oversharing can also quickly dominate the entire group, and the group energy gets pulled into details that aren't really relevant instead of using the collective field for integration and healing. And again, underneath, I often see shame, fear of invisibility, a deep longing to belong and be seen. And then there's also the attention seeker. And I know this game a little bit too well, where you use humor, drama, deflecting, smiling while crying, saying something painful, and immediately minimizing it, switching from I to we, acting instead of sharing vulnerably. And this is often driven by fear of abandonment or fear of being too much or not enough. If you notice yourself in the game, you also need to. This is often driven by a fear of not being enough. And this is often driven by a fear of not being enough or being too much. And if you notice yourself in this game, try to pause and slow down, even if it's just for 3 seconds. If you're in the middle of speaking in a circle, just take a deep breath and close your eyes and come back to your center. Because often this energy is ahead of itself. You will see people speaking very fast, hands are moving, head is nodding, scanning the room, checking if everyone is paying attention. Try closing your eyes for a moment, put one hand on your heart, and then speak from there. And finally, the know-it-all version of this game. The moment I think I have all the answers, ayahuasca usually puts me back into spiritual kindergarten. And I see often with men who do ayahuasca for the first times, they feel compelled to tell everyone what they realized, what we need to understand as humanity. and what we need to forgive. We are all one and we just need to forgive ourselves. But they're actually not feeling forgiveness. They're not asking what they need to forgive in themselves. They're saying we. And usually we are always speaking, I'm saying we, usually I am always speaking about and judging the medicine that I am looking for. So I'm speaking about integration. And guess the mother of all medicine I have right now is also integration. So when someone speaks about we all need to forgive ourselves, removing the we and looking into the I can be powerful enough if they are ready. And sometimes we can be in this game for a long time before we understand that we are playing a game with the content and not the consciousness that we're looking to become aware about. And again, all of these games serve a purpose. They have a positive intent of protection. So if we can spot this positive intent for us to feel helpful, wise, loved, seen, enough, we can also go into the wound that it carries and protects. Then the third game are the ego, power, and spiritual games. And this is also very common in a spiritual and healing circle. We often hear that it is around 4 million people worldwide who has worked with ayahuasca, and that's roughly a tiny fraction of the global population. So we are a very small family, 0.001% who has worked with ayahuasca today, if that number is correct. I believe it's more. And many of us are white, brown, not from a shamanic culture. And when we suddenly gain access to these experiences and this information, it can get overwhelming. We might start to believe that we have access to spiritual technology or data that nobody else have access to. And this is where the ego and power in the spiritual game starts to show up. It's a game that I'm personally very sensitive to because I've seen people play it and end up in cults or create very unhealthy dynamics with clients in integration and in transformational spaces. This game shows up as a guru game or the messiah or savior game, the I'm becoming a shaman game, and the I'm going to change everything in my life or I'm fully healed game. And I played many of these games myself. In my early years, I definitely had the I'm becoming a shaman game. And I think many of us go through this phase as our consciousness expands and we suddenly feel like we found the holy grail of feeling, and it's very seductive. This is also where slowing down becomes essential. The first version of this game is the guru game, where someone starts positioning themselves as a spiritual teacher, oracle, expert, or guide far too early. They haven't integrated much. They haven't gone through the fire where everything burns down. They haven't walked through long periods of confusion, humility, and service. A lot of their wisdom, a lot of their spiritual knowledge lives in their head, and that's okay. But it shows up as unsolicited advice, analyzing and explaining people's experiences, presenting personal insights as universal truths, or personal judgment as universal truths to everyone else. And suddenly someone wants to tell you what you should feel, what you should think, and what your experience actually means. And at the root of this game is ego inflation. As consciousness expands, the ego expands too. And what I see people struggle with the most in their spiritual spaces is not realizing how much power their spiritual ego has taken on. There can be a fear of inadequacy. There can be visionary stories about what they're meant to become. But what's missing is the integration and the basic containment and the container for that life. The ability to hold oneself in that expanded reality. So it becomes a strategy, a way to feel worthy. It becomes a strategy to feel important and in control. And vulnerability gets masked by appearing elevated. And I remember when standing in a yoga farm and hearing someone say behind it, I don't want to be in the room with that person. They have such a low frequency. Yeah, we all have energies we're not aligned with. But the moment we place ourselves above others as low or bad, something is waiting to be integrated and humility will come. And ayahuasca has this wonderful way of delivering it over and over again. And then there's the Messiah and Savior game, people feeling compelled to save others and not focus on themselves and their own process, to hug the person who's crying in ceremony, to fix someone in integration, to take responsibility for other people's experiences. And then there's the I'm fully healed and fully transformed game. After one ceremony, someone feels like everything is resolved, that they're enlightened, that nothing needs attention anymore. I've even had ceremonies where I genuinely believed my entire life had changed forever. And then when I came back to the same patterns and the same struggles, I felt so disappointed with myself. Not understanding that real transformation requires integration. It doesn't happen because something gets magically pulled out of you. It takes years, and it takes responsibility, and it takes also walking through discomfort. When someone declares themselves as fully healed, there is often a denial of what's still moving underneath. It can be a form of ego gratification and avoidance and deeper responsibility and support. And then there's also the ones who saying, I'm going to change everything tomorrow game. So I'm going to divorce the partner, quit the job, I'm going to move to the jungle. And everything feels like truth in that moment. That is why integration matters so much. Major life decisions don't need to be made immediately. If they're that honest and truthful, they can rest and ground for a few months. And if something needs to end, it matters how it ends, because completion matters. How you leave something is how you arrive at the next thing. Burning everything down rarely leads to clarity. Very often, the impulse to change everything is also a refusal to take responsibility for what already exists. You created this life, this relationship, this work. What can be transformed here before moving on? And then there's the unbecoming a shaman game, where many of us feel called to the jungle at some point, and some people truly are called to that path. And if you are one, deep respect and honor and bowing for you, my friend. But this can also be avoidance. Becoming a shaman is probably one of the hardest paths there is. It requires decades of service, humility, and initiation and training. And I have moments where I believe that this was my calling too, and each time I was invited to slow down and to look at where I wanted authority, or where I needed deeper healing, or where I needed to surrender even deeper. Putting that crown on too early comes with consequences. Running around serving medicine carries an enormous responsibility. If someone feels the calling to become a shaman, I would truly encourage them to have a deep counsel with indigenous elders and not local spiritual influencers. I would welcome you to at least try a year of service in a ceremony room, a year of sitting, a year of supporting before you even revisit that question. Start with service before placing a crown on your soul. The fourth game is the projection and comparison game. Projection is something we all do the moment we step into ceremony or an integration circle. In the beginning, I couldn't actually see myself projecting at all. I thought it was just who I was, and how other people were, and that I had some clean mirror and had also the right to judge everyone in the room if they were good or if they were bad, or if they belong or if they irritated me because something was off with their energy. It all felt very real and also very justified. I had a lot of entitlement with my judgments before. What I later realized was that it was almost entirely a projection of myself. One of the things I work with a lot is turning projections around, asking very directly, what are you actually judging in yourself? What are you projecting in a positive or negative way onto someone else that you are not yet willing to see, hold, or claim within yourself? And these games are universal. Every single one of us plays them. And most projections is driven by unconscious defense mechanisms. It shields us from confronting internal conflict and shadow, but also light. It also shields us from owning that light, our power and our potential. We project power onto the shaman. We project love onto the mother figure in the room. We project wisdom onto a guy on a podcast, okay, or an Instagram account. And what we're really doing is trying to see ourselves without distortion. Projection distorts relational perception. It pulls us away from the direct contact with our inner reality. And this is where inquiry becomes essential. What is mine here right now? What is my side of the road? In relationship, people often say, this is all your fault. You created this dynamic. But every relationship has two sides of the road when we are adults and are free and fully a part of that relationship with our own choice. If you don't see your side of the road, you're missing half of the truth. And this game also shows up as a mind reader game. People start assuming they know what other people are thinking, feeling, or intending, or saying, I know they are judging me, I know they don't like me. They project their own inner narratives onto the group. They are interpreting silence or tones or body language, and they start comparing ceremonies or participants or shamans, who's better, who's worse. And sometimes it goes even deeper. It turns into a us against them game, almost like a cult dynamic. This group doesn't like me, I don't belong here. Or this group is superior, we are different, we need our own home, we need our own retreat center. And all of this is projection. And comparing ourselves with others is just judgment in disguise. Every judgment carries also medicine for us, every single one. I remember asking a client once, how much do you judge yourself or others? And she said, at least 1,000 times a day. It's constant. It's my addiction. And after many months of working together, she came into a session and suddenly realized she wasn't judging herself. And after the session was over, took off all of her clothes, ran to the mirror, thinking, at least I can find a way to judge my naked body. And she couldn't. The judging part had dissolved, not by force, but by awareness and integration. This is why paying attention to judgments in group spaces matters so much. And in a recent integration circle I led, I asked everyone in the Zoom room to look at one person they were drawn to or repelled by, someone they liked or disliked, and I asked them to write down everything they believed was that person's shadow, what was blocking their light, what was problematic, and also everything they saw as powerful and beautiful and radiant. And then I asked them to remove the name at the top of the page and read it back to themselves into the room loudly. And what came back was a clear mirror. Many people said it was the most accurate description of themselves they have ever read and heard. Both their light and their shadow reflected back without distortion, without having to project it on someone else. And that's the projection and comparison game. And when we start seeing it clearly, it stops running our life unconsciously. God, so much of my life has been spent in this game. And I'm so glad that this work creates inner freedom. The fifth game is the belonging and isolation game. And if you've been to an ayahuasca retreat, you've probably been triggered by this one. Because again, all of these games are human. They are our human games. And this one is the one that I've been most prone to. The belonging and isolation game usually shows up with nobody likes me, I don't fit in here. And it also shows up as the undershare or silent treatment game where you don't really feel aligned with the group, so you participate as little as possible. You isolate yourself, you sit in the corner, you stay outside, you disengage for the group field, or you stay in your head daydreaming. Or it shows up as the outfit or role game where someone comes into ceremony with makeup and clothes and they are very clearly in a persona and they want to stay identified with that social role instead of being present with the ceremony. When we're in this game, it's because we're not feeling safe. So we avoid eye contact, we sit alone during meals, we say very little, we say I don't know or I don't want to share in integration. And I see this all the time when I facilitate retreats. People come up to me and say, I don't feel like sharing. I don't feel like being a part of the circle. I don't feel like this group is really for me. I've seen people even arrive, look at the shamans and the participants and say, these people are not for me. They look like hippies. The energy is wrong. And this is also normal. Belonging is one of our strongest survival needs. Thousands of years ago, if you didn't belong to a tribe, you might not survive at all. So of course, group spaces activates this deeply for all of us. And for facilitators, this is something you can scan for immediately. Are people feeling included? Is the group feel forming and is there safety? What I've seen again and again is that people who feel like they don't belong in the beginning of the experience usually have also the strongest sense of belonging by the end of the retreat. Or the person who was judging person A the entire time, when they confronted that judgment inside of themselves, they see that was actually the person that they were most drawn to. The one that we have the most resistance with carry the medicine that we're seeking. And for many, at the end of that retreat, they felt so deeply seen and deeply heard. And often it's the part of them that can sense the medicine coming that wants to reject it and run away. I also love watching the progression at the retreats. The first day, nobody hugs, everyone is strangers. The second day, everyone is hugging. And by the third day, people are hugging, crying. And the same people who were terrified of coming are now terrified of leaving. And that's the power of belonging. If you're triggered in this game and you can be honest about how you're feeling, you will discover that there are many other people feeling the same way. The group dynamic hasn't really formed yet, And group cohesion is formed through honesty and vulnerability. So if you speak up, you're creating this beautiful connective glue for the entire group to come together. Real belonging does not come from pretending or trying to fit in. It comes from telling the truth. It comes from telling the truth about actually not fitting in. And most of us are drawn to this work. There were parts of us that never fit into this normal world. So we went far, deep, and beyond to find the medicine that we were seeking, the plans that we were seeking. So please know you never have to fit in, but you truly do belong. In my early ceremonies, I always wanted to get the hell out of there. After the ceremony ended, I just wanted to be alone in my bed because I felt completely drained by people. I felt everyone was annoying. And I told myself I was an introvert and that I couldn't handle group energy really well. Then something shifted after 10 ceremonies. I started to wanting to sleep in the ceremony room next to other people, even with music and voices around me. And I started feeling so safe in community. I didn't need to run away from myself, and therefore I didn't need to run away from other people. I stepped out of the game that I didn't belong. I realized I did belong, and I didn't have to isolate myself. And that has been one of the greatest gifts of this work. Today, I don't need to isolate inside my apartment anymore. I can have friends everywhere. I talk to people everywhere I go with my dog. And I belong in my day to day life, not just in ceremony or just at retreats. And it's not because everyone likes me. Trust me, a lot of people do not resonate with me and my energy, but because I don't need to judge myself or others to feel safe. I am me, they are them. And together we can choose to engage with respect. And for me, this work has healed a very deep seated belief that nobody likes me, that I don't belong, that is rooted in bullying and abuse and early trauma. And a huge part of integration work is relational. It's not about finding the right people because they drink ayahuasca. It's about learning to be open and compassionate with yourself and with others. And everyone carries medicine, even the ones who are not on the spiritual path, and even people who has never touched any sacred plant medicines. So if you don't feel like you belong, I'm sending you a big hug. I know how painful this game is, and I know how much protection it builds. And I also know how beautiful it is when that patterns finally loses its grip through this work. Then there's the sixth game, which shows up a lot in ayahuasca retreats and integration circles, the pleasure and distraction game. And this one can be funny and very entertaining, and it can also be absolutely exhausting and frustrating if you're facilitating. I remember one retreat where one of my colleagues were sitting in front of me, and suddenly a participant took off all his clothes and was completely naked and starting rolling around the ceremony space. And we had to contain him physically, but my colleague suddenly had a naked man rolling on top of her body, and that was very uncomfortable for her. So we had to contain him out in the hallway until he understood that he needed to follow the rules and the structure of the ceremony room. And it was also a part of his process. And this is what I would call like a sensual or sexual play version of the game. Sometimes people suddenly feel very connected to their sensuality, and that in itself is not wrong, but then it can turn into this sexualized dynamic in the ceremony integration space. People are treating the ceremony space as a Tinder room or a dating aspect, or it can create like a lot of confusion, discomfort, and boundary issues for the entire group. And a lot is rooted in avoidance and shame. Suddenly, someone feels liberated, or they want everyone to be a part of their liberation party without attuning to the container and to the rules and to the boundaries and the people around them. And I feel for all of us who are going very deep into ayahuasca work, we will all feel the sensations of sensuality arising in a ceremony. And it's really important that we stay grounded because it is a sacred space and because people are extremely vulnerable. And because there is a spiritual component to this that is deeply sacred and ancestral, it's really important that you let that energy be grounded into the fireplace, into the ground, or ask the shamans for assistance if it's energy that you feel is running a little bit out of control. Even though it might feel for you that this is turning into a very essential party, that might only be a process for you to awaken and heal some deeper parts to your sensuality, and the rest of the ceremony integration room didn't sign up to that specific process. So even though there is no mistakes with your process, we still have to find that beautiful line in the sand where you can stay within the group container and it's a safe space for everyone else, including you. And then there's the drunken, silly version of this game where people are constantly laughing, they're hyperactive, they're clowning around, they're making faces, they can't lay still. And I remember one retreat where a woman would fart loudly every single time the shaman would speak. Every time someone shared an integration, she would fart again and then laugh out loud. And it was very disruptive and it broke the field and it pulled people out of their vulnerability. And that kind of behavior is usually just avoiding the seriousness and the depth. It's like a clowning defense. And in this case, I had to take her out of the integration circle and asked the psychologist at the retreat to hold the space while I sat down with her one on one. And I confronted her about what was going on. And what followed was a very deep process. And when she connected to herself and to the ground, she entered the group again and she was really present and very respectful. And then the group also felt safe to connect with her without being made fun of or farted in their face. And I played a lot of the clown role when things get a little bit too serious because it's a very safe role where you don't have to take too much responsibility and you can deflect, you can joke, you can stay light. But in the ceremony space and integration space, this energy also needs awareness because when it's unchecked, it can make people feel unsafe or it can puncture vulnerability and it can pull the collective energy away from introspection and reflection and the depth of the ritual. So people get distracted or they get tempted to join in. And most people who've done ayahuasca have experienced these moments where just everyone starts laughing together. Maybe the shaman says something really beautiful and then someone purges just on cue. And sometimes that's beautiful. Sometimes that laughter is such deep medicine, but with experience, you learn to feel the difference. Is the laughter coming from the core or is it a game being played to avoid vulnerability? And when it's the second, the invitation is always simple. Come back to your body, back to your breath, back to yourself, and back to your process, and back to your mat. And that's the pleasure and distraction game. Then there is the seventh game, which is another version of escape, but with much more charge in it. And it's the sabotage and boundary testing game. When people are rebelling against and not for something. This is where you see a lot of disruptive energy. Someone wants to pull the attention of the entire group onto themselves. And it's not always consciously, but it's very effective. I don't see it very often at my retreats because I work a lot with very experienced shamans from Colombia. But I've seen versions of it also with myself, where participants want to run off, leave the ceremony space, clearly hope that the whole group will notice and go looking for them. I had people go into the shower and stay there for a long time, refusing to come out, or breaking agreements, or breaking the container. And Lisa Bieberman talks about this where she mentions the Where's Harry game. Someone physically wanders off, they leave the ceremony space, they disengage from the ritual, they disappear energetically. And sometimes they come back and confront the shamans. They start telling the facilitators what's wrong with how they're facilitating, how they need to do it differently. And they keep pushing the limits. And at the core, it's almost always driven by fear and discomfort and avoidance, but it's also a way to escape emotional, energetic, and psychological intensity. Movement becomes the strategy. Disruption becomes the strategy. The ego tries to regain control by breaking structure instead of staying present with what's coming up. And this can create some anxiety for the group. People get concerned, or the ritual field gets disrupted. And facilitators can end up spending all their energy tracking one person instead of holding the space for 10 or 20 people in a room. And this also shows up as boundary testing. Someone constantly arrives late, they touch the sacred objects on the altar, they ignore the guidelines, they break the agreements, or in the Zoom room, they're always 5 minutes late, or they're always questioning the integration exercises, or they don't understand them, they don't see the reason why they have to meditate or why they have to journal. And it's important to say clearly all of these games, they carry healing in them. Every single one has a positive intent. I remember one ceremony where I felt a very strong impulse to go over and break a glass on the ceremony table. Not because I wanted to be a rebel or destructive, but because as a child, if I ever did anything wrong, I was severely punished. There was a part of me that had wanted to test the authority to see if I could do something wrong and still be safe, still be held, still not be punished. So I know for myself, witnessing over 1,000 people going through their process, that Every process is there for a reason. Ayahuasca is not doing this because she's testing out something. There is a deep intelligence and technology behind this that we might not understand. So, this is also why our judgment doesn't help towards anyone's process. And when someone does something and are in a very deep process and do something that they feel a lot of shame for the next day, I always say there is nothing to have shame for. That was your process. That was exactly what was going to happen, and it happened. There is medicine in it, even if we don't understand it. If it's done in a safe space with experienced indigenous shamans and great facilitators that can keep everyone safe. It's easy to sit later and say, that person was horrible, that person ruined my ceremony. But with proper facilitation and with the depth of ayahuasca herself, these behaviors often point straight to the core wound and are moving the energies that needs to be moved. And it's not always done in the most perfectly artistic, gorgeous, clean way. Sometimes it's really messy and a bit dramatic. And since ayahuasca knows more than all of us combined, I think when it comes to healing work, it's safe to say that each of these processes, they deserve their space. And boundary breaking even can be seen as an attempt to create safety, even if it creates unsafety for the group. And for many people, there might have been a childhood environment where chaos was familiar and structure wasn't. A ceremony space can feel unsafe for them, so they need to create a bit of chaos. They create what they know. But with containment and patience and experience, these games can lead to very deep healing. Not by shaming them, not by punishing them, but understanding what they're protecting and what they're afraid of losing. That's the sabotage and boundary testing game. And the next one is number 8, the magical and cosmic and divine games. And this is where we start seeing things like divine confusion. People feel like they've received so many insights, so many downloads that they don't know what to do with them anymore. And especially where people have done lots of ayahuasca retreats and never really integrated them, they're sitting there in their divine confusion. There's so many things to start integrating, they don't even know where to start. And one of my favorite versions of this divine confusion is I can't choose my path. Suddenly everything feels too sacred. You can't go on a date anymore. You can't go out. You can't do normal work. You can work, but it feels too sacred to speak about it, too sacred to market and sell it. And some people feel like they're too enlightened now, or they're trying to be enlightened. They read about enlightenment, they talk about enlightenment, but they can't really live it. And this is where the Oracle game shows up, or the Ayahuasca Told Me game, these magical, cosmic, divine games that can be really tricky. And one of the problems we have is that most Western therapy, coaching, doesn't really understand spiritual integration. Psychedelics can open up, and especially ayahuasca, a spiritual realm that is profound and one of the greatest and deepest experiences that we have in our lifetime. And for many people, this might be the first time they ever encountered spirits, non ordinary realities, and deeper spiritual truths. Often it's the first time in their entire family system or their friend circle or their culture, so divine confusion makes sense. What I see in this game is that people are making claims of having access to higher truths, spiritual authority, or enlightenment, and this confusion can become multidimensional, multifaceted, spiritual, existential. And it is also one of the hardest integration processes that I see people navigating by themselves. Because suddenly there's so much power and depth to what someone has seen and felt, and enormous pressure to choose correctly, to take the right step, to not mess it up. They feel stuck between being human and enlightened, awakened and asleep. And they've touched something vast, and now they want to live it and they want to be there all the time. But they also are messy humans, and they don't yet understand that enlightenment is one of the messiest games of them all. Our job here isn't to escape humanity. We signed up for humanity. We are humans. We are here to live. We are here to live being human fully in all its depth, in all its contradictions. Awakening does not give us a free pass of any of the hardship. Rather, the opposite. We can feel it even deeper. We can understand it even deeper. It's beauty and it's a mess. And this is where you hear a lot of people saying, ayahuasca told me. And I get it. If you had a deep relationship with ayahuasca, she can feel like the authority of all authorities, like the mother of mothers, because she is the mother of healing. She is the grandmother. And sometimes she speaks to you very clearly, and sometimes there are things that are shown to us that we need to take very deeply to our heart. But in this game, you will meet people that are contributing and attributing everything to ayahuasca. Ayahuasca told me that this is bad. Ayahuasca told me not to do this. Ayahuasca told me this about my childhood or this about my destiny. It's where discernment becomes crucial. Because not everything that comes up in the ceremony is ayahuasca speaking. Sometimes it's your spiritual ego. Sometimes it's your mind amplified. Sometimes it's an old authority pattern replaying in a sacred costume. It can be very confusing. I've also been very confused about this myself. The few times ayahuasca truly spoke to me, it was unmistakable, direct, clear. It had her voice, her presence, and there was no doubt in my mind ayahuasca was speaking. But that has only been a few times over 10 years. Many other times, it was just me sitting there all night, thinking, planning, strategizing, and avoiding confusion by creating meaning. And this is where ayahuasca is such a brilliant teacher. She doesn't come down and say, you have an authority issue. Here are the 3 steps to fix it. Instead, she might let you believe something for a while, let you follow it, and let you see where it leads until you realize you are the one who has to decide what is right for your life. Or she might say nothing at all, or drop you into your deepest confusion where you eventually have to make a choice and anchor yourself into your own heart and into your own consciousness. And these cosmic and magical games often live with one foot in the spiritual realm and one foot in the practical human life. It's like being in a trapeze, holding one hand in each world, and you're terrified of letting go. You want to choose the right side, right path, right identity, right level of enlightenment. But what I've seen again and again is that you can also just let go. If you fall, you don't disappear. You just land in something more true. Your actual true self becomes the safety net. And it's a paradox. Because the good news is there is no end. And the bad news is there is no end. You don't have to figure everything out in the cosmos in one ceremony, or in one retreat, or in 1 year after your first retreat or second retreat, or in one lifetime. You got eternity. So relax, slow down. And if you're sitting here thinking, I have to choose right, I have to do this, I have to do that, take a moment and just look at your life. Look at the work that you've already done and ask yourself, could you really have done more? Or are you already on your path, already doing enough? Often what's being asked isn't another leap into the unknown, but a deeper acceptance and responsibility of where you already are. And integration really asks for us to step into that responsibility for our choices, words, action, and thoughts. This is where many get stuck. They love the visions, they love the insights, they love the journaling, they love seeing the potential and daydreaming about it. But responsibility is heavier than revelation. And as awareness expands, responsibility expands with it. The 2 sides of the same coin. Freedom on one side, responsibility on the other, and consciousness. Your consciousness is that tiny center. So when someone is stuck in cosmic confusion, constantly saying ayahuasca told me, or floating in divine narratives, I try to bring them back with one question. What does this mean to you right now, here, today on Monday morning, in your actual life? If you took full responsibility for yourself today, what would change? Not in the cosmos, not in another dimension, but here. Because integration is not about jumping to the next revelation. It's about landing in who you are right now. And the beautiful thing is when we land in who we are now and we get to bring that magical cosmic divine game with us, but being aware of it when it is taking us out of our human center and into a space that feels almost unachievable. Integration is about landing in who you are with every part of you. And then there's my personal favorite game in integration transformational work. And then is my personal favorite game in integrational transformational work, which is the missing piece game. And this one shows up almost every single time someone comes into ceremony, and I can usually sense it in their intention, or it becomes very visible in integration circles in my one-on-one work. It's the missing piece. People come in with that feeling that something is missing inside of them, something is missing in their life, something that they're supposed to find, and they haven't found it at the right time, and they need to find it right now. That's the one missing piece that will make their life complete or their work complete. The missing purpose, the missing book, the missing job, the missing partner, the missing part of themselves. So they endlessly start seeking more knowledge, more spiritual practices, more courses, more trainings, more plant medicines. You're just piling it on, one thing after another, looking for the piece that will finally complete them. So they manifest and they collect strategies, buy books, attend workshops, they go to integration circles, they ask for guidance, they do more rituals, half moon rituals, cacao ceremonies, and underneath it, very often, the motivation is fear, shame, and avoidance for that raw internal work that they're avoiding. Instead of meeting the complexity of their inner world, instead of feeling what's already there of wisdom and knowledge and embodied, instead of meeting complexity of their inner world or feeling and meeting the parts of them that are complete, enough, radiant, alive, they are just trying to find more things to do. Because for many of us, worthiness is connected to doing, not being. Being on its own doesn't feel valuable. So if we do enough practices, if we scrub the floor for Jesus or Mickey Mouse or Buddha or someone else enough times, maybe eventually we will be granted belonging, love, and worthiness. And this game often overlaps with the busy brain game. Too many teachings, too many books, too many practices, too many modalities, everything at once. When I see someone in this phase or game, one of the first thing I ask them to do is usually makes them really triggered. I ask them to let go of everything. All the books, all the practices, all the meditation, all the techniques, even just for a moment. And that can feel terrifying because those practices can become a spiritual shield, a structure that keeps you from meeting yourself directly. Just even notice what happens if you sit with yourself, even for just 1 minute. No phone, no podcast, no meditation, no ritual, no strategy. Usually the response I hear is, "No, I need my practices. I need them every single day." And then they come into integration, they keep returning to the same story. Something is missing. I'm searching. I'm researching. I haven't found it yet. I need more knowledge. I need more practices. I need more plant medicine. And this game can keep someone busy for an entire lifetime because there can always be another missing piece or more spiritual books or more practices. And it's a very clever move of the ego. It's like a hamster wheel that keeps spinning in eternity, always a little bit just ahead, almost there. And what's interesting is that when someone finally realizes that there was never a missing piece, they often feel shocked, almost offended. They realized how much time they were spent searching, looking, spinning, like driving in a roundabout around their potential and everything that they wanted. Because what they discover is that if they slow down enough, if they stopped chasing, if they stopped avoiding themselves, if they started listening to themselves and their slowest moving parts, they would meet the parts of themselves that carry the truth, that carry the depth, that carry this ancient technology that only they carry, that carries the gifts and also carries the feelings that they never felt. And they see nothing was missing. They were just outrunning themselves. They weren't listening to the part that they claimed was missing. So that's the ninth game. And the last game is the shame and the self-criticizing game, which can be really difficult for all of us. And we all know about the inner critic, but in ceremony integration work, it can become really painful because this is so sacred. We're doing sacred work. And I remember one ceremony where guilt was everywhere in my system. It was like I could see a subconscious part of me, almost like a witch moving from one memory to another, door to door, looking for more guilt. Anything I could be blamed for, it found. And that day after the ceremony, I called someone I thought I might have said something rude to, and he laughed and said, "That was just a joke. Why would you even call me about that?" And then I felt guilty about calling. So that's how deep the guilt was running in me. And it was such a powerful game until it was transformed. And I shouldn't have made that call a day after ceremony. You should call no one the day after ceremony. You should sit there with it and integrate it. But instead, I acted from that guilt. I acted from that game. And this is also the guilt loop. You are constantly ruminating over old mistakes, what you did wrong, what you shouldn't have said, what you should have done differently, and the should have, and the could have, and the would have. And this is internalized shame many times, often rooted in our trauma. And instead of going into the deeper emotional material, the system creates this substitute. Self-punishment, self-attack, as if punishing yourself is the same as growth. And another version of this game is comparing yourself inward or outward. You look at the shaman or other participants Who purges the best here, or without the most sound, or who shares better, or who purges the least, or who sings better, or who seems most healed. And somehow you're always inferior. I worked with a client that was deeply stuck in this game, and I told him something simple. Let's befriend this room in this game instead of pretending it's not there. And I used a metaphor that landed for him. I said, this shame pattern is like a kinky room in the psyche where you're whipping yourself. You're not good enough. Over and over again. So instead of pretending the room doesn't exist, I invited him to name it. This is my shame room, or this is my guilt room, or this is my self attack room. And then just notice with awareness when you lift the whip. That alone can change everything because once it's conscious, it starts losing its grip. And you start seeing how absurd it is to walk into a room where you only hurt yourself and feel bad and then hurt yourself for feeling bad. It's endless. So the question becomes, can you bring yourself even a drop of compassion into that room? And another practice I gave a client was through her dog. If you have any type of pets that you love and adore, then you probably know that for some people, a dog can hold the projection of our inner child. We speak to them the way we wish someone had spoken to us when we were children, and we protect them in the way we wish that we had been protected. So I said to my client, next time you want to speak to yourself with cruelty or criticism, say those exact words out loud to your dog. And she couldn't. And from that moment, something broke. But she realized how unkind her inner language had been. And when it came outside and it was witnessed or confronted, it was also transformed. Maybe you don't have a dog, but you can still ask yourself, would I ever say that to my friend? And if the answer is no, then something might be off. Another doorway out of this game is also witnessing. Shame thrives in isolation. It thrives in the hidden mental rooms where nobody can see how cruel you can be to yourself. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to speak those thoughts out loud to someone you trust. A trained therapist, a facilitator, a friend on the medicine path, because the moment shame is witnessed, it weakens. And shame dies truly in safe spaces. And remember this, every game has a positive intention. And for me, self criticism gave me a sense of control, a sense that I was paying for my unworthiness, that I was managing myself. But life got infinitely better when I stopped choosing that game. And here's where I want to end this. There is actually a room inside of you that is already whole and already healed and already worthy and already complete. And you probably don't visit it often because it doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't run really fast. It doesn't attack. It doesn't demand fixing, but it's there. Maybe you're deeply intuitive. Maybe you listen in a way very few people do. Maybe you're very sensitive. Because giving attention to the parts of you that are already alive, that are already whole, that are already complete, it grows that part of you, celebrating and honoring and respecting every part of you is, of course, key in integration. That is the world and the work where integration lives. And paying attention to these games can be so helpful, but also bringing your attention to the parts of you that are not in the game, that are already complete, that are already whole. Bringing that attention there can make that aliveness inside of you, your authentic energy, blossom. And when it blossoms, it also starts healing some of these games that have been running the show while you were avoiding that true, beautiful, honest, authentic part of you that is home. So, these are the games that we play in integration and healing work, and especially in and after ayahuasca ceremonies. And I hope that they are helpful. And if you want to read more about them, you can go to ayahuascaintegration.org, where you will see a large article that goes more into detail on every single game. And if you notice any of these games in your own life or in the lives of others, choose compassion, openness, and curiosity, because curiosity truly is the doorway that can lead to more openness and eventually more conscious choice. We are all playing games, and my invitation to you is simply this. Choose the games that you do wisely. Have fun. Celebrate your life. And let the games that you choose nourish you, give you pleasure, happiness. Let them be a celebration of who you are and your life and the people that you love. Choose the games that gives you something to smile for, that brings you gratitude, that honors you. I hope these games were helpful, and I hope that recognizing some of them will also lead to more expansion and deeper integration on your path. That's what I got for you this week, my friend. And if you feel called to go deeper into your own integration work, I offer 3 journeys. I lead an integration circle for people walking this path with ayahuasca. And I just completed finishing a 6-month integration circle with therapists, coaches, retreat facilitators, and those that are going deep on this journey. You can sign up at davidvox.com. And when you're ready for the second journey, that's the celebration circle. It is 6 months of celebrating your life and your gifts. And the first reaction many people have is, why on earth would I want to do that? And the answer is quite simple. How you get there is how you will be there. If you are constantly healing and hustling and hiding and performing or proving, do you think that once you arrive there, you will suddenly feel free? Because I see that waiting to celebrate until after you achieved a new job, had more ayahuasca, or fixed your relationship is not the answer. Celebration is not the reward. It's the rehearsal. It's the daily act of self-respect, self-honor, and gratitude. It's the integration of who you already are. And when you learn to celebrate who you are now, every future version of you arrives already welcomed. And when we refuse to celebrate, it becomes our unfinished work. When you learn to honor the ordinary, to bow to your own brilliance, to see your gifts and story as sacred, something inside of you shifts. You stop chasing your life and you start inhabiting it. You start living it. And every other part of your world begins to rise to meet you. Your relationship, your voice, your joy, even your income. Because when you live in celebration, you attract a life that celebrates you back. And the 6-month celebration circle is built for that. 24 facets, 24 live mirrors. Every call shows you a different angle of who you are, what you project, what you hide, what you're not seeing. And it ends with the celebration ritual where 20 mirrors reflects your gifts back to you. Your only job is to receive. And maybe for the first time ever, you will see your full, faceted, multidimensional, gifted, abundant self. And then there's the third journey, Sacred Impact. And this is the one for leaders in the transformational and spiritual field who have this great vision, depth, and sensitivity, but they struggle to bring their service into tangible form here on earth. I've guided and coached over 5,000 leaders in the last 15 years, helping them create platforms and offerings that comes from a real alignment. Something that honors their integrity, their sensitivity, their pacing. And for 6 months, we meet as a group of 10. We bring your platform, your ideas, your service, your medicine into structure, into form, and into a rhythm that actually grows the tree you've been cultivating and produces the fruit you've been trying to reach for years. It's planting these seeds in a container where they can grow and bringing it into resonance and clarity, and then watching the fruits of this sacred work manifest in a way that finally feels true to who you are. You can find more information about these 3 journeys on davidvox.com. See you next week, my friend.